Welcome, everyone. It's the Mike Tech Show, show number 886. On tonight's show, I am going to discuss IT horror stories from my clients and a personal one for me. And then we're going to close it out with some emails from 3 listeners, some feedback on past shows. Now, it's Halloween week. Halloween was just a couple nights ago. I'm recording this on November 2nd because when I did the show on Saturday, I completely forgot that it was Halloween coming up. So I put out there for listeners to, hey, send me your IT horror stories, but there wasn't enough time. A lot of you are not listening the same week I'm recording it. You're a couple weeks behind, and that's great. So I figure I'm going to collect them. So please send them in to me, and I'll do another show from the listener standpoint. You describing horror story. Now, most of these stories have happy endings. So except for one, I'm not sure, but anyway, I'm pretty sure they're happy endings. So before we get started, a reminder, and I always forget to mention this weekend, if you're, depending on when you're listening to the show, you got to turn your clocks back an hour, depending on where you're located and what time zone, whether you participate in this or not, but we gain an hour's sleep, but then it gets dark real early. So just keep that in mind. And, all the analog clocks, you're going to have to manually set. I know the clock in my car, I'm going to have to set the microwave, the oven. I'm just thinking of all of the appliances and devices that do not automatically change for the time change. And then secondly, there will be no show next week because my wife's flying in. It's her birthday next Thursday, and she's actually flying down. She's going to spend a few days here, which is great. And I don't want to be, I just can't, no time to record a show. So the next show will be November 16th, which happens to be the day before my birthday. So November 16th, Thursday, and I have the Bush concert down here November 15th. So looking forward to that. And let's see what else. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, but I think I got it all. All right. So let's start with a pretty big horror story and more for the network engineer that was reporting to me than it was me. And I might have mentioned this in comparison in a different way, not as an IT horror story so much as it was on how to deal with it. And I might have talked about this years and years ago. So here's what's happening. And it actually, there's, Pearl Jam concert involved here. So I'll never forget the date. I am the enterprise network manager for AmeriGas Propane. That was my last corporate job. And this is April 28th, 2003. And I'm at a Pearl Jam concert at the Philadelphia Spectrum. It's not even there anymore. With my son, Michael Jr., and having a great time. Just an incredible time. And I get a call midway through the concert where one of my engineers was doing maintenance on Exchange servers, taking it offline, performing some maintenance to the Exchange database, and then, bring him back up, and he had all the instructions and everything. So I get the call, Mike, I accidentally overwrote the live Exchange database with one that didn't have the maintenance that was from the night before. And I'm like, he says, I stopped it in the middle but it's corrupt, and he's throwing himself, on his sword, and he just goes, he's so upset. He's like almost in tears. And I'm on my BlackBerry. I'll never forget this. And I was like, look, just turn the Exchange servers off, leave them off, but you got to hang in there until I get there, and I will come immediately after the concert. But first, I want to drop my son off at home, and then I'm going to come there, and we're going to discuss what to do. I said, just don't worry. So I drop my son off. I get in there. He's so upset. And what he didn't do was wait and perform the backup of the Exchange server before you start beginning to do the maintenance. So what happened is you have to, the details elude me, but I'm pretty sure you run the command and it builds a database on another drive or another space that's available. And then when it's finished, it copies back. Well, it didn't finish, and it started copying back and overwriting. And he did not perform a backup of this. We had 3 Exchange servers. So a third of the company is losing 1 day of mail because I have backups from all of the nights before, so which were successful. And there's no way of getting it back. I said, no. I said, look, this is it. I still opened a ticket with Microsoft to describe the details of everything, but in the end, I have to describe to my boss what happened. So this is where I think I used this particular story on how you spin certain problems. And I told my engineer, I said, you go home. I got this. And I stayed there all night. I worked a ticket with Microsoft. I knew there was nothing we can do to repair that database, everything. But I went through the trouble. I spent a couple hours with Microsoft on the phone and had a ticket. So this way I can reference that ticket, and even Microsoft couldn't fix this problem, that happened. So the server accidentally rebooted in the middle of the maintenance. And that was the spin. And watching and listening as it's how you describe things. Even a horror like that, where we've lost a day's mail for a third of the employees. Even that, it's how you deliver it. You can go in and say, oh my God, we lost a day's mail for a third of the employees. No. I went in there. We only lost 1 day. And let me tell you, there's a big difference in how you deliver the horror information. And if you deliver it with confidence and a positive spin, things will work out. And things did work out, because as my spin to my director, I watched as he spun it to the CIO, and I watched the CIO spin it to the CFO of the company. We're talking email of a $3 billion company here. And it was amazing. My engineer called me like later in the day. He wanted to be in, and I said, look, man, he was just so beside himself. I said, everything's cool. You want to come in later in the afternoon, fine, but don't worry, I got this. That's why I'm your manager. So I take the hit. So there's several lessons in here. How do you spin it? How do you deliver the horror that happened? And then protecting those that work for you. And because I had a similar incident that happened to me on years prior to that, where my manager hung me out to dry. And I learned from that, and that this will never happen on my watch. So there's a lot of morals of the story here. Back up, back up, back up. Check that you have a backup before you're going to do anything. So an incredible amount of lessons in a short story. Now, we're going to go back in time prior to 2003. Years prior. I'm trying to think of when, and it would be one of my early IBM PC clones. So this was like my first tower, and me and some friends built this ourselves. And the hard drives then, I think, were like 20 meg or something, and I'll never forget, and I don't know who gave it to me, but I had a full height, big, SCSI hard drive, and I wanted to hook it up into my system, and I got the power cable. I had a SCSI controller, and I got a SCSI cable. Look up SCSI if you don't know what SCSI is. I'm definitely dating myself. And my wife came down to the basement, and she seen me opening my computer up and working on it by myself. I said, I'm adding a hard drive. And she says, oh, please just don't blow it up. Don't blow up the house. And she says, I can't watch. And she went upstairs. Well, she later has to come down with the sound of my screams. So what happened, I plugged the SCSI cable in wrong. Now, this predates the notches on a SCSI cable, because I don't think it was possible, not too long after that, it was impossible to incorrectly install a SCSI cable, because they had a little notch, and you can't put it in wrong. There was no notch. I put it in wrong. I powered up the system, smoke started coming, and the SCSI cable sort of went on fire a little bit. It was burning up and going, and I'm like, no. And I stupidly reached both of my hands into the computer and unhooked the SCSI cable and burned. I'm lucky I didn't end up at a hospital or anything. And I burned my hands. They were in water for like an hour, just cooling off. And I'll never forget, I think my wife got some butter. She heard the blood curdling scream that I let out. And then she comes down, and it was a horror story. I mean, it literally was my own little horror story there, with smoke coming from the computer. And yes, to the chat, I pulled the plug, but that was after I got burned, of course. And there's you can smell. You can even like slightly smell the flesh from my hands. A lot of you are listening to this and saying, Mike, you should have let off with that story, but now here's the funny thing. Nothing like getting back on the horse the next day. I get a new SCSI cable, and I plug it in, and I triple check it to make sure I plug it in correctly. And that hard drive worked. The controller worked. I don't know how. I don't know why, but no components got ruined. The only thing that was ruined was the SCSI cable. And my hands took a hit. They healed, in a couple weeks. But, she wanted to take me to the hospital, and I just wouldn't do it, because I think part of it was just admitting to the stupidity of it, was stopping me. And they could still bend, and, that was, man. Anyway, that's one that, you'll never forget. It's just like the first time you're working with electricity and the first time you get shocked. you'll you never forget that. So you hope you live, and then you never forget that. All right, we're going to move into these are two stories from my son that I forgot about. And this is ransomware. I had to fight, or I say we had to fight 2 ransomware attacks to clients. And there's probably a lot of you saying, oh man, only 2? Yeah. But the first one was an early one. And I'll never forget. We've been hearing on the news, ransomware, and the message where it's asking for money to get your data back. And I get a call from one of the employees that's the son of the owner, who is now runs the company, because the owner has since retired. And as a matter of fact, my son was on site with him yesterday, and I asked him to send me a picture. He said, there's something on the screen. It's not letting him do anything. He says, it's talking to me and it's asking for money. And I was like, do me a favor, quickly send me a picture. It's the first time that I'm ever seeing ransomware. I immediately call him once I read that. I said, I want you to just go pull the plug on every computer, including the server. I said, do it now. Now. Go. Here's the thing. And you don't know that. You kind of read about ransomware, but the damage is done. Once the message comes up, that's it. It's over. It's already encrypted the data that it was going to encrypt. And I just had to make sure that how many systems am I dealing with here that's infected? So I immediately call my engineer who was in the corporate world and used to work for me years ago. And I said, meet me on site. Give him the client's name. Meet me on site. Now, my son only remembers this from me discussing it because he was not working for me yet full time. And Ken and I were on site and we're dealing with the problem. We make sure everything is disconnected. We pull up and boot up the server. Nothing's on the network right now. And we look at the server and it's just really the one shared drive that is infected, that has all of the encryption. I don't care about the workstation. There's nothing that we're going to save on the workstation. And I tell my client, we're going to take this and I'm just blowing it away and redoing it. We started recovering the one shared folder on the server from a Shadow Protect backup that backed up every night that was local to the server. And by the way, the next ransomware story, we're going to credit Malwarebytes and Shadow Protect. This predates Malwarebytes. So we are on the server and we see that we just got the one directory and we're like, okay, the executable is on the employee's workstation. We power up each system and test it, and we're running antivirus. I forget what we were running. It might have been Trend Micro or something that we were running just to take a look. All of the other workstations, there were like 5 other workstations, were good. It was just his system. And it was anything that was connected. And so we're mapped. And he has one drive mapped. And that mapped drive got hit. We were so fortunate that backing up from last night, the backup and doing the restore of that directory, they really didn't lose anything. I think there was 1 or 2 files that were created that day that were then fixed, that, they were able to easily recreate it. So they were very, very fortunate. And I remember my first visit with that client and describing the backup, and he's like, "Oh, how much is that going to cost?" And I said, "You have a real physical server. I will not help you unless we are backing that up." And I still stand by that today. I will never take on a client that has a real server and we don't back it up. We are backing it up. We're doing, even if you're getting an external drive and it's local, we're going to back this guy up, and it's going to back up every night. And this is one of the reasons. This is the only way to truly fight ransomware, is having good backups. And then the backups have to be encrypted, because you don't want the backups to be ruined. Because had this went unnoticed, the backup of that server, that directory, would have been compromised. We would have backed up encrypted files that would never be able to get back. So you have to go to the last backup before the ransomware hit in order for this to work. And you hope that you caught it in time, that it didn't fester for a couple days. So this is where our first time, and I'll never forget, was like, once we had that recovered, and I'll never forget Ken and I in my office at home, and he's like, "We have a chance to really look at this." It was like poking and prodding a little alien, that we were, learning what it could do, and we wondered, are PST files encrypted? So we booted this up on no network and ran a couple things, and I'll never forget, yes, the PST files were encrypted. We had literally 2 USB sticks we were playing with that we threw away when we were done. But we wanted to see what it did, and it was every directory that it touched locally, it put text files describing how to make the payment, how to do it. We learned a lot and took a lot away from seeing this one ransomware. And I forget the name of this ransomware, but it was an early one, and it was our first experience. Now, let's move ahead. My wife and I are vacationing in Disney, and one of our biggest clients gets hit where the directory that is shared, let's just say, for the vertical market that they're in, that's the key software for their business. And it's just not working. So my son and Ken head to the client, and they discover that it's ransomware. But now, how could ransomware get in? It's a peer server. It's running Malwarebytes Premium, and we have Malwarebytes Premium literally on every system. Made it mandatory. It's running on every system. Well, except for one of the agents who's not a full-time employee, came in with their laptop that was infected with ransomware and plugged into the network, which they were mapped to the one drive that had the program and the program files. But luckily for us, the database for that is in a different directory and did not get compromised. So I can't say the software, because it would give away the industry and everything about this client. So I don't want to, I can't discuss that. But that software directory, again, I went to the local backup from the night before. Once we discovered, as he visited, as the two, as Ken and Mike Jr., they visited every workstation. I'm now on the phone with them, and I'm on the phone with Malwarebytes, and with one of my contacts, we're talking about what they need, and we get them the logs that they want, and we figured it out that the only system and the only way it could be in there was this system was not sanctioned or worked on for us. And that, by the way, is now new policy after that day. Nobody can walk in and plug a computer into their network without us remoting in, putting on Malwarebytes, putting on just, we got to sanction and look at that system on the, not the, on the public network now, because now this also caused having a private wireless and a public wireless, and the public still had a password, but it goes around everything. You can't print, you can't, all you can do is get to the internet. So we can have them on that network where we remote into the desktop, use an instant house call, get connected, boom, fix it all up, and make sure that now, hey, we blessed it. You can plug that into the regular network. That is now law on the for that client. And again, a happy ending. Nothing was lost. Just that directory that had the executable and the programs and the ini files that were needed. And that was it, because the database was on a totally different directory, which was a proprietary database for this software. So it wouldn't have been, we were kind of lucky that there were no real data drives being mapped here. It was just to run this program. So we were fortunate because of the data was allowed to, the way it was managed by this vertical software, which, by the way, doesn't even exist well, it does exist, but they went to an online version of that, years later. So now there are two ransomware stories. I want to talk about two stories here of social engineering and how clients were compromised. And for these two individuals, definitely a horror story. We get a call from the husband who runs the business, and it's a small carpet company, and it's his wife's computer. And he's like, Mike, we got a problem. He says, my wife was conned into going to the bank, getting $6,000 cash, putting it in a box, and shipping it to someone. She was called by someone pretending they were from Amazon and that there was a problem with, there was a $600 problem with the account. And you're like, well, how do we get from 600 to 6,000? Well, this is the con. They say, oh my gosh, we credited you 6,000. We meant to credit you the 600. We credit you 6,000. You're going to need to send that to us. And we can't even accept a credit card on this. You need to send us the 6,000 because, hey, we gave you the credit for it. And she's like, oh, okay. They said, look, just go to the bank and go. Now, my son went on site and did, started a deep cleaning, but he started thinking about this. It went via UPS. She took it to one of the UPS stores and sent it the day before. It had not arrived at the destination. And my son mentioned that. He said, do you have the tracking number? And she did. And he said, let's call UPS. Let's give them that info and let's get that package back if it hasn't been delivered. They actually got the box back with the cash. So it's a happy ending there. So and this was pure con, social engineering, but again, a nightmare. I'm going to give you another one. We get this client because of this incident. We get a call from the financial advisor. This is their client, and says, Mike, can you take care of this? The lady has 2 credit cards compromised. And he tells us the story. And my son, I dispatched him going to the client to start the cleaning process and learn what he can about the details and see if he can help. Well, again, social engineering, someone pretending they were the IRS and she owed money. And she gave the credit card. Well, they compromised that credit card. So because they did, and she did not know this yet, they called back the next night and said, that card didn't work. Do you have another card? And she gave them the second card. And they compromised that. Now that, a couple days later, reached her financial advisor, thank God, because then she was able to call both the credit cards. I didn't learn that was everything gotten back. I think they were, because they were real credit cards. And keep that in mind. If you have a debit card, you're not getting that return possibly. It could be a fight as opposed to a real credit card. So now he cleans the system and then has the discussion, which I've shared with you many times, and I'm not going to go down that road, but our discussion is listen to no one. Never do something that someone's asking you to do. If there's a phone number that pops up on your screen, call this because the end of the world's got. Don't listen. Don't call it. Anybody that calls you and asks you to do, don't do it. You read something on Facebook, copy and paste. Don't do it. Don't ever do it. I don't care who it is. If someone's asking you to do something, don't do it. You can always verify. You can always double check. And you can always check with us by, that's how I always tell our clients, reach out to my son or myself. Text us before you do anything. We would rather get hit up with that and save you than you respond. And let me tell you, we get a lot of emails and a lot of text files of pictures of emails and pictures of messages. Should I believe this? Should I accept it? And we're like, no, don't. Or wait, there's a Malwarebytes update happening. Should I do this? Yes, do that one. So we get many questions from clients, but we would rather get the question from the client than having them compromised. So that's the horror stories and sprinkled around to give you kind of an idea. Hey, give me your horror stories. MikeTechShow@gmail.com. I want to hear them. I want to share with them. Leave the client names out, or you tell me what I can read and what I can't. So that would be great. So this is from Michael. Now I'm going to follow up with 3 emails on past shows. You forgot NFC. They can be read. This is about the credit card fraud. They could be read inches from your wallet. I went into a wing restaurant today, and they have a QR code on the table that says order and pay. I paid in cash since I didn't have any money on my card, so I didn't use it. And here's a debit card number 1 credit card number I give when someone slips into my phone spam filter. So he has that's pretty cool. So you can have some fake numbers, and I might put that link in there, to get fake numbers that you can give to someone. All right. Yeah. Now this is from Bob, and I listened to your podcast about credit card fraud, and I am with you on hating it when the server leaves the area with your credit card. I am curious if your customer's new card that got hacked is the magnetic strip type or the one with the RFID chip in it. My wife and I used these RFID blocking sleeves with all of our credit cards now. That, by the way, that's a good idea. The card in the sleeve fits right into your wallet, which protects them from being scraped if someone gets too close with an RFID scanner. They also protect the card from having the credit card number scanned when you have them out on the table. I have even tested these at the gas pumps with our RFID chip cards, and it will not read them while they are in the sleeve. You touched on the first way they can get your card's information, but there are also the RFID chip cards that can be scraped. And, this is good because I forgot about this. Using card skimmers or shimmers, these small devices collect credit card data from your card's magnetic strips, which criminals then use to create a cloned card. Thieves install skimmers on ATMs and gas pumps, which I pointed out, and other publicly available card readers. Shimmers are the natural evolution of card skimmers, but instead of stealing data from your card's magnetic strip, they go inside the reader and steal your chip information. Wow. Many modern cards use radio frequency identification, RFID, for countless payment. A thief close enough to you with the right device can use this technology to scrape your credit card information. There are very few reports of this scam, but it could grow as RFID becomes more common. Here is a link to 14 ways scammers can steal your credit card numbers in 2023. Thank you, Bob. I am going to put that in the show notes. So a show that I thought I wasn't going to have any links, I'm actually going to have some links. So this is great. This is from Nancy, regular listener. And this is about traveling. And remember, not forgetting your things for traveling. And, I just awoken the nightmare for someone in the chat. All right. Most of our travel is road trip travel, but I've got it down to a science. I have a packing list that I keep in Evernote. This is cool. And I just print it off for every trip, and I take it with me for the return trip. I have an additional section called If This Is a Working Vacation, and it includes all my work stuff like computer, power, dock, one monitor, smart cards, etc. I've added to it over time to accommodate changing needs. But some things are universal. It's easy to forget little things unless you use a list, and I have come to the point where I just don't even try to remember things I can use a list for. Nancy, thank you so much for that. And I'm a list person, but I gotta admit, I don't have a travel list when I'm traveling. And I really should, because I got my, I travel with my MacBook, and I travel with, lots of technology, little things to keep me connected. So thank you. Thank you for all the feedback, everybody. Remember, no show next Thursday, November 9th. The following week, I will have a show. So the next show will be Thursday, November 16th. Everybody, have a great 2 weeks. Remember, turn your clocks back. We get that extra hour this weekend. That'll be nice. And thank you for staying subscribed and downloading the show. Don't forget, use the forums over on Discord. And in order to join that, there's a link in the show notes every week. So click that to join the forums. I have been very, very bad. And I know I keep saying that I got to participate. And I promise I will get in. I've been too busy. And I have to do that. So there's lots of people that join that and answer each other's questions and stuff. It's good. It's great place. And again, that's Discord, and it's free. YouTube channel, Michael Smith, MTS. Don't forget, subscribe to the show. Everybody, stay safe. See you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.